Very good afternoon to Shakespeare scholars and fans. I would like to share some of my observations about Shakespeare's lengthiest and the most enigmatic play of all, that is Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark. This play is so famous that it has been made into various generical modes and in media exhaustively. Even recently, you had an Indian version in Hindi titled Hyder, and there is no end to any of Shakespearean plays being made, remade, rediscovered. And why so? Why so? This has been very famous and popular. That is very important. Now, here I am to present a few things which might have missed the perspective of some of us, because we generally think about Shakespearean tragedy as based on the Aristotelian vision of tragedy, the concept of classical Greek tragedy. In fact, the Roman playwright, the fourth BC Roman playwright Seneca, and his revenge tragedy entered Elizabethan England even before Aristotelian tragedy could enter. So Elizabethans generally were so used to Senecan vision of tragedy. This is very important. You see, Seneca himself was a rebel during his time, like Euripides in classical Greek. Euripides was not able to be in Greece, Athens. He just left Athens, you see, like that. Seneca. Seneca was living beside a line of three emperors, and he could survive the first two. But the last emperor, Nero, when it came to him, he was accused of indulging in some kind of treacherous activity, treason. So Seneca, unable to handle the situation, Seneca offered to commit suicide. It was a Roman honor then, and he was allowed, he was permitted, it was granted that Seneca could take his life off. You see, that is history. Like Euripides, Seneca was also not understood properly and accepted legally, constitutionally by the rulers. To such an extent, Senecan thought was so new. So this Senecan tragedy serves as a fitting model for Shakespeare's Hamlet, which is hailed as Shakespearean revenge tragedy. You see, Seneca was the first one to define revenge tragedy. We generally dismiss Senecan tragedies from stage theatrical aspects because Senecan tragedy is considered or was considered as unstageable, unactable. The improbability of staging such gruesome violence and bloodshed on stage rendered, or rather reduced, Senecan tragedies to become closet dramas, something which ought to be read, recited, rather than enacted, and then to be reshelved rather than to be staged. So, these Senecan tragedies ought to be given a reread. The truth, which was not often spoken till now, which is not spoken popularly, prevalently, is that Senecan tragedies are based on his concept of Stoicism. What is Stoicism? Stoicism also, like Senecan tragedy, taken for granted by our teachers by just dismissing it or simplifying it as passive suffering. It is not all that simple. let me present my PPT for you to have a better and easy understanding of what we are talking about. You see, you have to understand the trajectory from Seneca to Shakespeare. So, I would like to approach the whole thing with a brief introduction to Seneca, Senecan tragedy, and English revenge tragedy, and then English Senecan tragedy, and before reaching to Hamlet. The main focus of this session is going to be a critique on English revenge tragedy in general and Shakespearean revenge tragedy in particular, with reference to the tragic vision of Hamlet. The tragic vision. What do we get out of this? How this tragic vision has been attained by the dramatist? That is very important. You see, like Aristotle attaining a tragic vision of classical Greek tragedy, taking Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, with a slight exception in Euripides, which I have already talked about. Because Aeschylus and Sophocles, these two people were totally convinced and were promoting the idea of determinism. Man as predetermined, the individual free will, the Dionysian attitude towards life, as the resistance against the Apollonian system. And finally, this Dionysian free will is crushed, and the Apollonian system emerges stronger than ever before, rigider than ever before, severer than ever before. This is the, what shall we say, the dramaturgy, the process of thought, the trajectory of tragic vision in Aristotelian tragedies. Whereas in Senecan tragedy, it is Stoicism. See, Seneca himself was a strong believer in Stoic philosophy. And Senecan Stoicism is focusing upon the nobility of self. You see, it is a Hellenistic philosophy actually founded by Zeno of Citium in 3rd BC itself. But Senecan revenge tragedies dramatized that. Drama is the finest mode of, the most effective mode of communication because it gives a space for dialogue. That is very important for any cognitive process, for any hermeneutic exercise. A dialogue must be evolved, a discourse must be made possible. Senecan tragedy allowed a discourse on Stoicism. What is Stoicism? Stoicism is nobility of self. The self asking at certain point, what is life? As Hamlet asking in the play, 3rd act, he asks, to be or not to be, that is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind, you see, the nobility of self, whether it is nobler in the mind to bear the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune when the world is chaotic, when the system is chaotic, when there is no equilibrium between cause and effect, reason and result, virtue and reward, and vice and punishment. Is there any nobility in self? Do I have to preserve myself against all odds? Shakespeare's Hamlet is hailed as tragedy of moral idealism, like we calling some of the plays as tragedy of a civilization. For example, Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller is called Tragedy of a Civilization. Sister Carrie by Theodore Dreiser is called Tragedy of a Civilization. Like that, Hamlet is hailed as tragedy of moral idealism. How moral idealism, the nobility of self, has to put itself against the majority, the collective self, the system, not the self, the system. But the system is the majority. Physically, materially, the system is a brutal force. But this nobility of self, like a samurai warrior, the nobility of self, the Roman honor, instead of being humiliated, one can take his life, her life off. It is not a sin against God according to Roman concept, because of the nobility of self. These Stoic heroes, you see, they try to stand for their conviction. You see, that is what you find in Shakespearean tragedies in general, not only in this revenge tragedy. Shakespearean tragedies in general talk about the tragic grandeur. The tragic grandeur is not the social status from which the hero falls down. It is not that. The tragic grandeur is that the hero is such a personality, the noblest of all human beings, dwelling, inhabiting that space created by the drama. The noblest. We offer only the noblest of the animal as a sacrifice to God, to cleanse the world of its sin and guilt. Tragedy in itself, tragos means goat. Oides means song. It is a goat song. So this tragic hero, Aristotle argues that as good, but not do good. But here the self is put against the system. The system physically, materially, constitutionally aggresses the self, but the self doesn't give up. What is the tragic grandeur? At the point of the play, the protagonist understands that he or she is fighting a losing battle against an unsurmountable enemy. The indefatigability of majority. At the same time, even after realizing that he is fighting a losing battle, the protagonist, the nobility of the self, doesn't give up. It continues fighting. That is the grandness, the grandeur of a tragic hero. And what is the tragic irony? The tragic irony is that at a point, not only the hero, but the audience also realize that the protagonist is fighting a losing battle. When they realize that he is fighting a losing battle, by then they would have fallen incurably admiring of his character. So they would not want the protagonist to die. So they would want to stop by all means. They would like to stop the protagonist from what shall we say, in the pursuit of this fight, continuation of this fight. But if the hero stops fighting, he sacrifices the nobility of his self. He sacrifices, he compromises the most admirable quality of his character, for which we have been admiring him. We have fallen in love with him. You see, so knowing very well, to sustain our admiration for the protagonist, we let the protagonist die. You see, this is the irony. We let something die because we want to sustain our admiration of that thing. If we stop the play, if we close the book, text, then the protagonist is going to live in us, live there in that literary world. No, we would not do that because the protagonist has attained such nobility because he is ready to fight the losing battle, knowing very well that it is a losing battle. but ready to do it because he is convinced of his free will. He is convinced of what he is doing. This moral conviction, you see, is almost supernatural. Though supernatural elements are an integral part of revenge tragedy, you see, like say the elder Hamlet's ghost haunting the castle of Elsinore. The first movement of Shakespeare's Hamlet is attributed to that. You see, in fact, supernatural elements, demonology was the most popular study during Elizabethan and Jacobean times, during Shakespeare's times. People believed in the existence of supernatural elements. There were so many explanations about a fair ghost and an evil ghost, a good spirit and an evil spirit. You see, if the spirit appears in the form of a man or a bird, it is a good spirit. If a spirit appears in the form of a beast, then it is a bad, evil spirit. And the spirits, as Shakespeare's Hamlet in the opening so effectively dramatizes, the spirits can sometimes be communicated. They obey the command given in Hebrew or Latin. You see, the holy languages, like Sanskrit is supposed to be in India. We don't believe in such things. You see, anyway, they say that Sanskrit is God's language. You see, a language in itself is God. You see, back to our discussion. You see, now the ghost at the crowing of the first cock, when it dawns, the ghost will disappear. The ghosts generally haunt human inhabitation, human dwellings, to reveal some secret about some hidden treasure or something else. These are some of the strong, well-defined beliefs people had during Elizabethan times about supernatural elements. But generally in revenge tragedies, there will be intervention of supernatural elements, whether it is a Shakespeare's Hamlet or John Webster's Duchess of Malfi. In Duchess of Malfi, the echo, which resembles the voice of the dead Duchess, alludes to the supernatural presence in the climax, in the last scene. And revenge tragedies are always marked with morbid humor, negative humor, dark humor. There is a plethora of such incidents in Hamlet as well as in John Webster's Duchess of Malfi. You see, morbid humor, deadly humor, a humor which does not ease your heart, a humor which can be called a dark humor, you see, which creates a wry smile, W-R-Y, wry smile. You see, the wisecracks given by Hamlet, you see, the asides given by Hamlet are best examples for this morbid humor. When the king asks him, how fares our son? You see, why our son? You see, you are in the clouds. You are in the clouds. You see, for which Hamlet answers, nay, my lord, I am much in the sun. When he says sun, it stands both for S-U-N and S-O-N. The issue in Hamlet is Hamlet's father is dead under mysterious circumstances. People are told that he was stung by a serpent while he was speaking, while he was sleeping in the orchard in the afternoon, after his lunch, as he always used to. You see? But the ghost reveals to Hamlet that he was actually poisoned. The king was actually poisoned while sleeping in the orchard. His brother Claudius came and poured poison into his ears, which caused immediate death. ENT system, you see, immediate death. And now he has married his wife, the queen Gertrude, and he is throning. He's occupying the throne, ruling the country. You see, that is what revealed by the ghost. So the king has died under mysterious circumstances. Now Hamlet has to take revenge. When Hamlet is in the court, he's so preoccupied. Now he does not know. In the opening scenes, he doesn't know. The secret of death has not been revealed by the ghost yet. The ghost of elder Hamlet has not met the Prince of Denmark, its son, yet. Even before that, Hamlet is so melancholic because before a month after the death of his father, within a month, he says, nay, not even a month, he says in his first soliloquy, which begins with, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt and thaw and dissolve into air. That is the first line, full sentence, soliloquized by Hamlet, the young prince of Denmark. Can we ever imagine a young man, you see, almost introducing himself with the idea to the audience or to others with the idea, representing himself. Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt and thaw and dissolve into air. He proceeds to say his conviction that this world has become an unweeded garden. An unweeded garden, you see, where the good crops and the bad elements coexist, and what is meant for the good ones is enjoyed by the bad ones also. Why? This is a question, moral question raised by Hamlet. Now, even before the ghost reveals to Hamlet that it has been that the king was murdered, even before the start of the revenge tragedy motive or the motivating factor or the point of attack, you see, even in the exposition itself, by the end of the expository act, there comes the motivating factor, which we call plot point, you see, from which the play takes a rising action with conflict and suffering, you see, something which motivates the action, the dramatic action. Even before that, in the expository act itself, we find Hamlet so melancholic because of the crude reality about the carnal desires of this world. His mother, who has lived with his father within a month of the death, she has married the brother of his father. How is it possible? And Hamlet, not only as a son, but also as a prince, he says, why she, even she? What does it mean by why she, even she? He means that his mother, he's a moral idealist, the mother of a moral idealist, the one who has lived with someone like his father. In the soliloquy, he has a list of comparisons. He compares his father with Hyperion, the sun god, and his uncle with Satyr, Satyr. Satyr is half goat, half man, which stands for insatiable, incestuous inclination. Mythologically, it is a wood nymph which is imagined as a man's face with a goat's body with spiked ears and horn, holding a bugle and blowing it. This is the mythological image of Satyr, Satyr, Satyr. The Satyr is the symbol of insatiable, incestuous inclination. So Claudius marrying Hamlet's mother, according to Hamlet, it is incestuous because brother's wife should have been a sister to him. So how could she and he get married? Not only that, she, the one who has lived with someone like a sun god, his father, the ghost of elder Hamlet, appears fully armed. You see, cap a P, they say. Cap hyphen a hyphen PE, cap a P, means head to foot. Such a military discipline. Sun god. Whereas this uncle is a satyr, a monstrous animal, a monstrous being, a deformity, like Sphinx in Sophocles, Oedipus, or anywhere. Sphinx is that. You see, like that. How can she live with him? She chose to, if she chooses to live with him, then it should be nothing but physical desire. That is why Hamlet says, oh, that this too solid flesh would melt and thaw and dissolve into air. You see, this is Stoicism. Stoicism understands the futility of the earthly life, where only the nobility of the self can attribute some meaning to our existence. You see, you should know Stoicism very clearly. Stoicism is not helplessly suffering. No, it is an active suffering. Like Mahatma Gandhi's non-violence. You see, it is an active suffering. Why? Because Stoicism believes in the good spirit. You see, variously spelled as eudaimonia or eudaimonia or eudaimonia. Variously spelled. The good spirit can give happiness. And this happiness is the welfare achieved by virtue, excellence. You see, virtue, excellence, and ethical wisdom. What is this virtue? Cardinal virtues like prudence. You see, virtue is not floating in the air. The Prince of Denmark is very practical. To his friend, he comments upon alcoholism. While there is a party going on in the castle, his friend Horatio, bosom friend, whom in drama are known as the stock character, confidant, the trusted lieutenant, like Enobarbus to Antony. You see, like Enobarbus to Antony, like Delio to Antonio in John Webster's Duchess of Malfi. Here you have Horatio, classmate, schoolmate of Hamlet, the Wittenberg scholar, the radical scholar. You see, he is the one who establishes the presence of the ghost. When the two soldiers ask him to visit the castle of the battlements of the castle of Elsinore, the open terrace of Elsinore Castle, which is haunted by the ghost for the past 2 days. Horatio enters that place without belief. But when he sees the ghost, he understands and he imparts this information to Hamlet, his prince and bosom friend. Hamlet actually dies in the lap of Horatio in the climax. You see, it is to Horatio he says, "Rest is silence." You see, go and tell the world that that their prince was not a mad one. You see, so Horatio is the ambassador, the emissary of truth for Hamlet, the embodiment of virtue and scholarship for Hamlet. Hamlet himself praises Horatio so. You see, in the play, in the text, such a noble character Horatio is. And Horatio, to Horatio, Hamlet says, when he sees, when they listen, the din created by the party guests and hosts, Hamlet, that is why, Denmark, that is why the world outside calls us savages, brutes, animals. We revel too much in drinking and carnal pleasures. Who says the Prince of Denmark, the young Prince of Denmark, the Wittenberg scholar, compare him with the present young people? You see, young people generally think life ought to be physically enjoyed, but carnal virtues, there are physical virtues are there, such as the cardinal virtues. Prudence. You should use your prudence. What you call as radical thought, pragmatism. Then justice. You should always practice justice. You should always practice justice. And whatever problem comes, you see, it is like the modern SWOC, strength, weakness, objective, challenges. You see, what is your strength? Your strength must be, you must be prudent. You see, you must always try to practice justice. You cannot escape by saying that I'm a worldly wise person, I don't believe in this kind of justice. No. You should apply justice. Justice must be practiced. So, to practice justice consistently, to sustainable level, what do you need? Fortitude. You find fortitude in character. Whatever problem comes to these people, they are all momentary lapse of reason. Whether it is the Duchess of Malfi in John Whitford. Time and again I go to Duchess of Malfi by John Whitford because it is also a very important revenge tragedy. It can be called Websterian revenge tragedy. Like Hamlet can be called Shakespearean revenge tragedy. Because revenge tragedy was not introduced into English or English theatre by either Shakespeare or by John Whitford. Revenge tragedy was actually introduced by people like Thomas Kidd. You see, the first English tragedy, the Spanish tragedy, which also is known as Geronimo is Mad Again, written between 1582 and 1592, because there are various versions. There are not versions, there are reviews. There are various revisions. You see, it has been consistently rewritten and staged between 1582 and 1592. That is why we have this almost 10 years of span, you see, by Thomas Kidd. It set the standard conventions of revenge tragedy. You see, it was not Shakespeare who introduced revenge tragedy. Not blank verse, even blank verse. Shakespeare did not introduce that. It is Thomas Middleton, you see, who introduced blank words, you see. Like that, Shakespearean sonnet, English sonnet. English sonnet was introduced by Wyatt and Surrey. But whether it is sonnet, or it is blank words, or it is tragedy, revenge tragedy, we call them by the adjective Shakespearean. Not just because Shakespeare became successful, but Shakespeare was the one who improvised upon it. Very important thing. He was the one who attributed the couplet, who introduced the couplet into otherwise octave sestet form of sonnet. That's why today Shakespearean sonnets read as ABAB, CD, EF, GG. Instead of ABBA, CDE, or ABAB, CD, EF. You see? This is Shakespeare contribution to English sonnet, which really made sonnet rightly be called as English sonnet. Like that blank verse, Shakespeare understood the potentiality of blank verse, which is made of the unrhymed iambic pentameter lines, which was very close to the spoken rhythm of English language then. You know what an iamb is? Iamb is a disyllabic foot in which an unstressed foot is followed by a stressed foot. That is in the natural speech pattern, speech rhythm of English language. So Shakespeare made extensive use of blank words. He was the one who popularized it. But Shakespeare could not be confined to any grammar. He would even use sonnet in conversation. In Romeo and Juliet, when Romeo and Juliet first talk to each other, talk with each other, they speak in sonnets. Shakespeare deliberately makes them speak in sonnet because sonnet means a room. That room belongs to lovers. The second sonnet, when it is going after Romeo and Juliet kiss each other, the second sonnet begins, and the second sonnet is interrupted by the arrival of the nurse, maid, an old person. The beautiful world of young ones is disturbed. So it is Shakespeare's master touch. So Shakespeare can use anything. He would use prose for Othello, when Othello is morally integrated. When Othello is confused, he would use poetry. Shakespeare would decide, his place would decide. The context would decide language, the grammar. The grammar would not decide context. Shakespeare would never allow it. He's a free flow artist. So in English revenge tragedy also he has improvised. I will tell you one thing, a very simple thing. The most important, almost, I can say only that much. How can I categorically say? You see, because Senecan tragedies were considered recitatiae, to be recited rather than to be performed, closet theatre rather than to be staged. You see, because of the gory, gruesome violence. In John Webster, Duchess of Malfi, Ferdinand gives to the Duchess what he pretends to be the hand of her husband Antonio. Gruesome violence, bloodshed. You see, in Hamlet, the climax, like a mad rush, so many people are killed. It's like what Virgil would say, ignorant armies clashing at night. Ignorant armies clashing at night. Ignorant armies clashing at night. The armies in themselves are ignorant. And the atmosphere is night. What will happen? Like a drunken brawl in Shakespeare's Othello, in Cyprus, which creates the problem. For Michael Cassio, which is manipulated, the whole thing is manipulated by Iago. That is a different story. So, gruesome violence. You know what happens in Hamlet? In Hamlet, the physical violence is minimal. Polonius, the elder king's death is not shown. Polonius's death, when Polonius, who is hiding behind the screen in the bedchamber of the queen, while Hamlet is opening his heart to his mother, when Hamlet comes to know that someone else is hiding behind the arras, he loses all his fortitude, he loses all his controlling power, self-control, and even without removing the curtain to see who is hiding behind it, he just thrusts his sword and kills the person. It is Polonius, the old senator, the father of Shakespeare's girlfriend, the father of Laertes, who is studying in France, Ophelia's father. Stupid fellow, poking his nose into others' affair in order to have political advantage, political gains, caught in the crossfire, knowing very well what he is playing with. Whereas Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, Hamlet school fellows, they come to Denmark later in the play. They think that they are helping their mad prince. They are helping the king. They are helping the queen. So they get involved in the action. But Hamlet thinks that they are spying upon him as the agents of the king. So finally they also die. But these people are innocents, caught in the crossfire. Whereas Polonius knows what he is playing with. But for political gains, this old man, stupid old man, he dies. This death, this murder would have lasted on stage, not even for a minute. Hamlet is crying to his mother. She sits. Suddenly, his mother, sensing some violence, cries, "Help! Help!" Hamlet. Then Hamlet looks up his mother. Then he hears the cry echoed by someone hiding behind the curtain. "Oh, help! Oh, help!" Then Hamlet is shocked. He's out of his wit. He's out of his self-control. All along, I was speaking so intimately with my mother, talking about things which are unthinkable, unimaginable to be conversed with the mother. You see, and all along, someone was listening to this, the intimate talk between the mother and the son. The son asking mother not to go to bed with his uncle. You see, what a pathetic condition it is. Openly, the son asks the mother, "Please stay away from my uncle's bed this night alone. If you can stay away from his bed this night, tomorrow, next night also you can stay. So you can stay permanently away from his bed," he says. You see, what a pity. What a pity. But this scene would have lost on stage. In a few minutes, Hamlet draws his sword. "How now? What? A rat? Bed for a ducat. Dead." He gives a thrust, and the person falls down. Dead, he says. 1 minute would have been over. The climax battle would have the war, the duel between Laertes and Hamlet, and all the subsequent murders. They would have lost for a few minutes. So physical violence in Hamlet is minimum. Where else is the gruesome violence? The violence is psychological, emotional violence. In that way, Shakespeare makes his mark as Hamlet as Shakespearean Revenge Tragedy. We will meet in the next installment. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.